Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped off his cargo ship. The twin suns of Kethvar Prime beat down on the busy spaceport. Alien creatures of all shapes and sizes moved around him, carrying boxes and shouting in languages he did not understand. He had been a salvage operator for 5 years now. It was not glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Today, he needed to pick up some rare metals from the Kethvari traders. After that, maybe he would look around their famous marketplace. Marcus checked his utility belt. His tools were all there, including the old sword he always carried. He had bought it at a yard sale back on Earth for $5. The elderly woman selling it, Martha something, had said it was just decorative junk from her late husband's collection. But Marcus liked the weight of it. It made him feel safer in the rough parts of space. The sword was nothing special to look at. The metal was dull gray, and it had some weird markings carved into the blade. Marcus had tried to clean them off once, but they seemed to be part of the metal itself. He figured they were just some kind of fake alien writing that someone had added to make it look exotic. The Kethvari spaceport was loud and smelly. Marcus pushed through the crowd, following the signs toward the trading district. The Kethvari looked like tall, thin lizards with 4 arms. Their skin was dark green, and their eyes were huge and black. Most of them wore simple brown robes. As Marcus walked through the marketplace, he noticed something strange. Several of the aliens had stopped what they were doing and were staring at him. Not at his face, but at his belt, at his sword. One young Kethvari dropped the fruit he was selling. The round, purple fruits rolled across the ground as the alien backed away, his mouth hanging open. Marcus looked down at himself, confused. Was something wrong with his clothes? More aliens were gathering now. They whispered to each other in their clicking language, their big black eyes fixed on Marcus's sword. Some of them were pointing. A few had fallen to their knees. "Excuse me," Marcus said to a nearby trader. "Is there a problem?" The alien just stared at him with terror in his eyes and ran away. Marcus was starting to feel uncomfortable. He put his hand on the sword handle, ready to defend himself if needed. The moment his fingers touched the metal, a gasp went through the crowd. Then someone pushed through the group of aliens. It was an older Kethvari, wearing fancy white and gold robes. His movements were different from the others, more confident and important. Marcus guessed he was some kind of leader or priest. The robed alien stopped in front of Marcus and stared at the sword. His 4 hands began to shake. He said something in the Kethvari language, his voice full of awe and fear. "Sorry, I don't speak your language," Marcus said. The alien priest tried to speak in Standard Galactic, the common language used for trade between different species. His words came out broken and strange. That blade," the priest said, pointing with a trembling finger. Where you get?" Marcus shrugged. "Yard sale. Cost me $5. The priest looked confused. "Yard sale? $5? Yeah, you know. Where people sell old stuff they don't want anymore. This lady named Martha had a bunch of junk in her driveway. I thought the sword looked cool, so I bought it." The priest's eyes grew even wider, if that was possible. He turned to the crowd and shouted something in his own language. The other aliens began to back away further, some of them prostrating themselves on the ground. "You not understand," the priest said, switching back to Standard. "That blade is Veltaroth, the God-Slayer, sacred weapon of the sky gods." Marcus looked down at his sword again. "This old thing? I don't think so, buddy. It's just some decorative piece, probably made in a factory somewhere." The priest shook his head frantically. No. The markings. I know these markings. They are written in the texts of my people. Only the divine ones can touch Veltaroth. Only gods can raise that blade." Marcus pulled the sword halfway out of its sheath. The metal seemed to catch the light strangely, almost like it was glowing. Several aliens in the crowd fainted. This Marcus said, holding it up. I got this from a yard sale bin, next to some old kitchen stuff, and a broken toaster. The priest's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, then fell forward, until his face touched the ground. Forgive me, Sky God, he cried. I did not know. I did not recognize you. Marcus looked around at the crowd of terrified aliens. This was not how he had planned to spend his day. All he wanted was to buy some metal and maybe grab lunch. Now he was apparently being worshipped by lizard people who thought his $5 yard sale sword was some kind of holy weapon. Look, there's been a mistake, Marcus said. I'm not a god. I'm just a guy with a cargo ship, trying to make a living. But the priest was not listening. He was chanting something in his own language, rocking back and forth on his knees. More aliens had arrived, drawn by the commotion. Word was spreading quickly through the marketplace. Marcus sighed and put the sword back in its sheath. He had a feeling this was going to be a very long day, and he still had not bought those metals he needed. Behind him, his cargo ship sat quietly in the spaceport. The sword at his side seemed heavier now, though Marcus knew that was just his imagination. After all, it was just junk from Martha's yard sale. Wasn't it? 3 hours later, Marcus found himself sitting in a huge stone building in the center of Kethvar Prime's capital city. The room was filled with old Kethvari wearing fancy robes. They called themselves the Council of Elders, and they all kept staring at his sword like it might explode at any moment. The priest from the marketplace, who had introduced himself as Zarthek, sat across from Marcus. He had brought a translation device so they could talk more easily. The machine was old and made weird buzzing sounds, but it worked. Please, honored Sky God, Zarthek said through the translator. Tell us of the time before. Tell us of your great battles with the Dark Ones. Marcus rubbed his temples. He was getting a headache. For the last time, I'm not a Sky God. I'm Marcus Chen from Detroit. I fix broken spaceships for a living. I bought this sword at a yard sale from an old lady named Martha. One of the Elder Council members, an ancient Kethvari with silver markings on her scales, leaned forward. What is this yard sale you speak of? It's where humans sell old stuff they don't want anymore. You know, clothes, books, kitchen things, random junk. Martha's husband had died, so she was getting rid of his collection of old weapons and armor. Most of it looked fake to me, but I liked this sword. The elders exchanged worried looks. Zarthek spoke to them in their own language for several minutes. Marcus caught a few words that the translator picked up. Weapons, armor, collection, and something that sounded like sleeping gods. Finally, Zarthek turned back to Marcus. We must tell you our history. Perhaps then, you will understand why we are so afraid and so hopeful at the same time. Marcus sighed. Fine. But make it quick. I have a cargo delivery scheduled for tomorrow. The silver-marked elder stood up slowly. Her voice was deep and serious as she began to speak. 15,000 years ago, our people were young. We had just learned to travel between the stars. Our worlds were peaceful and beautiful. Then, the void spawn came. Marcus frowned. Creatures of darkness and madness. They came from the empty spaces between galaxies. They were not like any life we knew. They existed partly in our world, and partly in somewhere else. Somewhere terrible. Zarthek took over the story. The void spawn consumed entire star systems. Not just the planets, but the stars themselves. They turned living worlds into twisted nightmares. Our weapons could not harm them. They passed through our ships like they were made of air. Sounds rough, Marcus said. But what does this have to do with my sword? The elder continued. When all seemed lost, they came. Beings that looked like you, Marcus Chen. Tall, with your skin color and body shape, But they wore armor that shined like stars and carried weapons that could cut through reality itself. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Humans? But that's impossible. 15,000 years ago, humans were still living in caves on Earth. These sky gods saved us, Zarthek said. They fought the void spawn, with weapons like the one you carry. Weapons that could hurt creatures that existed between dimensions. The war lasted for centuries, but finally, the sky gods won. They drove the void spawn back into the dark spaces where they came from. The elder sat down heavily. Then, the sky gods left. They said their work was done. They warned us to watch the stars, because the void spawn might return someday. They left behind only legends and a few sacred weapons in our temples. Marcus looked down at his sword. The markings on the blade seemed to be glowing very faintly now, though he told himself it was just the light from the room's windows. The markings on your blade, Zarthek said. They match the ones in our oldest temples. The same symbols, the same pattern. That sword is Veltaroth, the Godslayer. It was carried by the greatest of the sky god warriors. This is crazy, Marcus muttered. It's just an old sword from a yard sale. Before anyone could respond, a young Kethvari burst into the room. He was covered in sweat and breathing hard. He spoke rapidly in his own language. His voice filled with panic. The elders all stood up at once. Several of them began praying. Zarthek's face went pale green, which Marcus figured was the Kethvari equivalent of turning white with fear. What's wrong? Marcus asked. Zarthek's hands were shaking as he worked the translator. Our deep space monitors have detected something at the edge of the galaxy. Energy signatures we have not seen for 15,000 years. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The void spawn? They are returning, the elder whispered. And this time, they bring a much larger fleet. Alarms began blaring throughout the city. Through the windows, Marcus could see Kethvari running through the streets. Ships were taking off from the spaceport in all directions. Zarthek grabbed Marcus's arm with two of his 4 hands. You must help us, Sky God. The prophecies say that when the darkness returns, the gods will awaken again. You are here now, at this exact moment. It cannot be coincidence. Marcus stood up, his hand instinctively moving to his sword. The weapon felt warm under his touch, almost like it was alive. I'm not a god, he said quietly. I'm just a guy who bought a sword at a yard sale. But even as he said it, Marcus was beginning to wonder, what were the chances that he would show up here, with this particular weapon, just when these void spawn things were coming back? And why did the sword feel so familiar in his hands, like he had been carrying it his whole life? Outside, the sky was filled with ships fleeing the planet. In the distance, space itself seemed to be bending and twisting as something terrible approached from the darkness between the stars. Marcus looked at the terrified faces of the Kethvari elders. Then he looked at his sword again. The markings were definitely glowing now. Okay, he said finally. Tell me everything you know about fighting these void spawn things. And somebody get me a stronger cup of coffee. I have a feeling it's going to be a very long night. 2 days later, Marcus stood on the bridge of a Galactic Defense Force battleship, watching something that made his brain hurt to look at. The void spawn fleet had arrived, and it was unlike anything he had ever imagined. The ships, if you could call them ships, looked like they had been designed by something insane. They twisted and bent in ways that should not be possible. Some parts seemed to exist in normal space, while other parts flickered in and out of reality. Looking at them too long made Marcus feel sick and gave him a splitting headache. How many? Asked Admiral Korth, the Kethvari officer in charge of the defense fleet. We count at least 300 vessels, reported the sensor officer. But the number keeps changing. Some of them seem to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Marcus gripped his sword tighter. Ever since the void spawn had appeared, the weapon had been getting warmer and brighter. The markings on the blade now glowed with a soft blue light that hurt to look at directly. "Admiral," came a voice from the communications station. "We're getting reports from across the sector. The Void Spawn have already attacked 4 star systems. The planets. They're gone, sir. Not destroyed, changed into something else." On the main screen, images appeared from the attacked worlds. What had once been green, living planets were now twisted masses of dark crystal and writhing tentacles. The very space around them seemed sick, like reality itself was infected. "By the ancestors," whispered Admiral Korth. "Just like the old stories." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. He thought about all the innocent people who had lived on those worlds. Families, children, people just trying to live their lives. Now they were gone, consumed by creatures that had no right to exist. "What are our weapon capabilities?" Marcus asked. The Admiral looked at him with respect. Word had spread quickly through the fleet about the human who carried the legendary Godslayer blade. "We have plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and gravity bombs. The most advanced weapons in the galaxy. End-on weapons. Will they work?" The Admiral's silence was answer enough. On the screen, the Void Spawn fleet began to move toward them. As they got closer, Marcus could see that they were not really ships at all. They were living things, creatures the size of cities with too many eyes and mouths full of teeth like black stars. "All ships, open fire," Admiral Korth commanded. The space around them lit up with weapon fire. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked toward the Void Spawn fleet. Marcus watched, hoping to see the creatures destroyed, or at least hurt. The weapons passed right through them. Every single shot, every missile, every energy beam went through the Void Spawn like they were shooting at ghosts. The creatures did not even seem to notice. "Impossible," breathed the weapons officer. "Direct hits on all targets. No damage detected." One of the Void Spawn creatures, a thing that looked like a jellyfish made of nightmares, drifted close to their ship. As it approached, the lights on the bridge began to flicker. Several crew members fell to their knees, holding their heads and screaming. Marcus felt it too. Something cold and alien trying to push into his mind. But when he touched his sword, the feeling went away. "Marcus," Admiral Korth said, his voice full of desperation. "Your weapon. The legends say it can hurt them." Marcus looked at his sword. The blade was glowing so bright now that it cast shadows around the bridge. He could feel it pulling him, like it wanted to be used. "I need to get closer," Marcus said. "What?" "Maybe. But sitting here isn't helping anyone." 20 minutes later, Marcus was strapped into a small fighter ship, racing toward the nearest Void Spawn creature. His hands shook as he piloted the craft, but not from fear. The sword at his side was vibrating now, humming with some kind of energy that made his teeth ache. The Void Spawn creature he was approaching looked like a massive eye surrounded by writhing tentacles. As he got closer, Marcus could see that the tentacles were not really there. They flickered in and out of existence, like they were reaching through from somewhere else. Marcus brought his fighter in close and activated the docking clamps. They passed right through the creature's skin without resistance, just like the weapons had. But when Marcus opened the cockpit and stepped out onto the creature's surface, his boots found solid ground. The surface of the thing was covered in symbols that hurt to read. They seemed to crawl across the creature's skin like living tattoos. As Marcus walked across the surface, the symbols began to glow brighter, as if they were reacting to his presence. Or to his sword. Marcus drew the blade. The moment it left the sheath, everything changed. The sword blazed with brilliant light, and suddenly Marcus could see the creature for what it really was. Not just a giant eye with tentacles, but something far worse. Something that existed in multiple dimensions at once, reaching through reality like a cancer. The creature noticed him now. The massive eye turned toward Marcus, and he felt its attention like a physical weight. The thing spoke, not with words but by pushing thoughts directly into his brain. The thoughts were full of hunger and madness, and the kind of cold emptiness that existed between galaxies. Marcus raised his sword and brought it down on the creature's surface. The blade cut through the thing like it was made of butter. Where the sword touched, the creature's flesh dissolved into nothing. The void spawn let out a sound that was not really a sound, more like reality itself screaming. Marcus felt the sword guiding his movements now. His arms moved without his conscious control, cutting and slashing at the creature with perfect precision. Each strike removed another piece of the thing from existence. But as he fought, Marcus became aware of something else. The sword was not just a weapon. It was intelligent. And it remembered fighting these creatures before. Images flashed through Marcus's mind. Humans in gleaming armor, wielding weapons of light and energy. Ships that could travel between dimensions. Battles fought across thousands of worlds against creatures like the one he was fighting now. The memories were not his own, but they felt real. They felt true. With a final strike, Marcus drove his sword through the center of the creature's eye. The void spawn convulsed once, and then began to dissolve. In seconds, the massive creature was gone, leaving nothing but empty space. Marcus stood alone in the void, surrounded by starlight. His fighter ship drifted nearby, and through the cockpit window, he could see the Galactic Defense Force fleet watching in amazement. He had killed a void spawn, a creature that had existed for millions of years, that had devoured entire galaxies, was gone because of a sword he had bought, at a yard sale, for $5. Marcus looked at the blade in his hands. It was still glowing, but softer now. The markings along its edge seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "What are you?" he whispered. The sword did not answer. But Marcus was beginning to understand that the answer was not about the sword at all. It was about him. After Marcus destroyed his first void spawn, everything changed. The sword in his hands had become more than just a weapon. It was trying to teach him something, filling his mind with memories that were not his own. He sat in his quarters aboard the Galactic Defense Force ship, staring at the blade. Every time he touched it, more images flashed through his mind. Humans fighting impossible battles. Cities that floated in space. Weapons that could reshape reality with a thought. This is impossible. Marcus muttered to himself. Humans were primitive 15,000 years ago. We barely knew how to make fire. Marcus. But the memories felt real. More real than his own childhood back on Earth. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Admiral Korth entered, followed by Zarthek and a human woman Marcus had never seen before. "Marcus," the Admiral said. "This is Dr. Sarah Kim. She's a human archaeologist who has been studying your species' history." Dr. Kim was middle-aged with short gray hair and intense eyes. She carried a large bag full of data tablets and looked like she had not slept in days. "Mr. Chen," she said, sitting down across from him. "I need to ask you some questions about Earth, specifically about what you humans call antiques and collectibles." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "Doctor." Kim pulled out a data tablet and showed him pictures. These images were taken from various human settlements across the galaxy. "Look carefully at what your people keep as decorations and family heirlooms." Marcus looked at the pictures. They showed normal human homes, but as he studied them more carefully, he began to see what Dr. Kim meant. There were swords hanging on walls that looked similar to his own, armor pieces being used as flower pots, strange devices that people used as paperweights or bookends. "So?" Marcus said. "Humans like to collect old stuff." "The big deal, Doctor," Kim said, "is that none of these items are actually old. When we test them, they all show the same age. Exactly 15,347 years. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "That's impossible." Dr. Kim pulled up more images. "We've found similar items all across human space. Always passed down through families. Always treated as worthless junk or decorative pieces. But when we examine them closely, they all show signs of incredibly advanced technology. She showed him a picture of an old man polishing what looked like a simple metal cup. This man thinks he's cleaning his grandfather's beer mug. In reality, he's maintaining a device that can purify any liquid, no matter how toxic. Another image showed a woman using an ornate box as a jewelry holder. She has no idea that box can store objects in a pocket dimension. Starting in. Marcus's head was spinning. You're saying all this junk that humans collect, it's actually advanced technology? Not just advanced, Dr. Kim said quietly. Impossibly advanced. Technology that our current science says should not exist. Zarthek leaned forward. There is more, honored sky god. We have been investigating the history of your homeworld. What we found, it changes everything. Dr. Kim activated a holographic display that showed the solar system. Earth is not humanity's original homeworld, she said. 15,000 years ago, a massive ship crashed in what is now the Pacific Ocean. The survivors scattered across the planet. Marcus stared at the hologram. A ship? What kind of ship? What? A colony ship, Admiral Korth said, one of the great ark vessels that carried refugees during the Void Spawn Wars. But something went wrong. The ship's memory banks were damaged in the crash. The survivors lost their technology, their history, even their language. Dr. Kim nodded. The humans who survived had to start over from scratch. Over thousands of years, they forgot who they really were. But they kept the items from the ship, passed them down from parent to child without understanding what they were. Marcus looked at his sword with new eyes. So this isn't just some random weapon from a yard sale. That sword, Zarthek said with reverence, belonged to a human warrior priest named Marcus. The same name as you carry now. 73. Quote, Marcus nearly dropped the blade. Dr. Kim showed him an ancient text from the Kethvari archives. The legends speak of a human named Marcus, who carried Veltaroth into the final battle against the Void Spawn. He was one of the greatest heroes of the war. Marcus felt the memories stirring in his mind again. But now he understood what they were. Not random visions, but genetic memories. The experiences of his ancestors, locked away in his DNA, and awakened by contact with the sword. The crash was not an accident, Admiral Korth said quietly. The human command deliberately hid your people on Earth. They knew the Void Spawn would return someday. They wanted to keep humanity safe. Until that day came. But they left safeguards, Doctor, Kim added. Genetic locks in your DNA. Programs that would activate when the Void Spawn returned. That's why you can use the sword. That's why it responds to you. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the Void Spawn fleet in the distance, growing larger by the hour. How many humans are out there with these antiques? He asked. Millions, Doctor, Kim said. Every human family has something. Most of them don't know what they have. But as the Void Spawn get closer, the items are starting to activate on their own. Marcus turned back to face them. What do you mean, activate? Admiral Korth showed him a communication report. We're getting strange signals from human settlements across the galaxy. People are reporting that their family heirlooms are glowing, humming, or moving by themselves. Marcus thought about Martha's yard sale, the sweet old lady who had sold him the sword for $5. Dr. Kim, what do you know about a woman named Martha on Earth? She had a whole collection of this stuff. Dr. Kim's eyes widened. Martha Henderson? She contacted us yesterday. Apparently, her entire garage is now glowing bright enough to be seen from orbit. Marcus laughed, but it was not a happy sound. She sold me this sword from a bin next to a broken toaster and some old kitchen stuff. The toaster, Dr. Kim said quietly, is probably a matter compiler that can create any object from raw atoms. The kitchen stuff, is likely a set of molecular cooking tools that can prepare food from pure energy. Marcus sat back down heavily. So you're telling me that humanity are the descendants of space gods? Earth is full of super weapons disguised as junk, and I'm supposed to save the galaxy with a sword I bought at a yard sale? That's about right, Zarthek said. Marcus looked at his sword again. The blade was pulsing with warm light now, and he could feel something awakening in his mind. Knowledge that had been locked away for thousands of years was starting to surface. He knew how to fight the void spawn. He knew how to use weapons that could bend reality. He knew things that Marcus Chen from Detroit had never learned. Okay, he said finally. But I'm going to need help. A lot of help. Dr. Kim smiled for the first time since entering the room. We've already contacted every human settlement in the galaxy. They're all reporting the same thing. People are remembering things they never learned. Old men are picking up swords and moving like trained warriors. Grandmothers are operating advanced technology, like they've been doing it their whole lives. Marcus felt a grin spreading across his face. The void spawn think they're facing the same primitive species they fought 15,000 years ago. They have no idea, Admiral Korth said, that humanity has been quietly preparing for this day ever since. Outside the window, space itself began to ripple as more human ships arrived. But these were not the simple cargo vessels and passenger transports that humans usually flew. These ships gleamed with impossible technology and moved in ways that defied physics. Humanity was waking up. And they were very, very angry. The battle for Earth began 3 days later, and it was nothing like Marcus had expected. He stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the void spawn fleet approach the solar system. There were thousands of them now. Creatures of living darkness that twisted space around them just by existing. They had consumed 17 star systems on their way to Earth, leaving behind nothing but infected space where reality itself was sick. But Earth was ready for them. Marcus looked at the tactical display and grinned. The space around Earth was filled with ships, but they were not the simple human vessels he was used to seeing. These ships gleamed with silver and gold armor. They moved without engines, bending space around them like origami. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Status report, Marcus called out. All defense fleets are in position, replied Captain Sarah Kim. She had traded her archaeologist clothes for combat armor that looked like it was made from starlight. The Luna defense grid is online. Mars command is ready, and the Jupiter station weapons are charged. Marcus nodded. Over the past few days, he had watched in amazement as humanity transformed. All across the galaxy, humans had been remembering who they really were. The genetic locks in their DNA had finally opened, releasing 15,000 years of suppressed knowledge and ability. The sweet old lady from the yard sale, Martha Henderson, was now commanding the Earth Defense Force from her backyard in Ohio. She wore the same floral dress she always did, but now she also carried a weapon that could crack planets in half. Her junk collection had turned out to be a complete military arsenal from humanity's golden age. Incoming transmission from Earth Command, the communications officer announced. Martha's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exactly the same as when Marcus had bought his sword from her, except for the slight glow around her eyes that meant she was interfacing directly with advanced computer systems. "Hello, Marcus, dear," she said in her usual grandmother voice. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected, Martha." "How's the neighborhood?" Martha chuckled. "Oh, you know how it is. Mrs. Patterson from next door turned out to be a specialist in dimensional warfare. That nice young man who delivers my mail is apparently a genetic super soldier. And my bridge club has formed an elite strike team." Marcus shook his head in amazement. Only humanity would turn a bridge club into a military unit. "We've always been practical people," Martha said. "Now, about these void spawn creatures. Are you ready to show them what happens when they mess with our galaxy?" Before Marcus could answer, space around them erupted in chaos. The void spawn had arrived in force, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Creatures the size of moons writhed through space, followed by ships that looked like they had been built from nightmares and dark matter. But humanity was ready. Marcus drew his sword. And across the solar system, millions of other humans did the same. Weapons that had been disguised as antiques, decorations, and yard sale junk blazed to life. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. "All units," Marcus said into his communicator. "This is it. Remember who you are. Remember what you're fighting for." The first wave of void spawn crashed into Earth's defenses like a tidal wave of living darkness. But instead of overwhelming the human ships, something incredible happened. The creatures that had passed through every other weapon in the galaxy suddenly found themselves being cut to pieces by human technology. Marcus watched as Martha's next-door neighbor, a quiet man who had worked as an accountant, piloted a fighter ship that moved like liquid light through space. The man's decorative letter opener had transformed into a blade that could cut through dimensions, and he wielded it with the skill of someone who had been fighting cosmic horrors his entire life. The battle raged across the solar system. On Mars, human colonists who had thought they were farmers and miners revealed themselves as warriors capable of fighting creatures that existed in multiple realities at once. Around Jupiter, space itself became a battlefield as humans wielded weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. But the real surprise came when the void spawn tried their usual trick of infecting reality itself. They sent waves of madness and corruption toward the human fleets, the same attack that had broken countless other species. The humans just laughed. "Is that all you've got?" called out a voice over the radio. It was Jake Thompson, a guy who had worked at a fast food restaurant on Tau Ceti. His lucky wrench had turned out to be a tool that could repair damage to the fabric of space-time itself. And he was using it to fix reality faster than the void spawn could break it. Marcus found himself in the thick of the battle, his sword guiding him toward the largest void spawn creature. This one was different from the others. Older, more powerful. It existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and had been responsible for destroying entire galaxies. As Marcus approached the creature, he felt the full weight of his genetic memories awakening. He was not just Marcus Chen from Detroit anymore. He was the inheritor of humanity's greatest warriors, carrying the knowledge and skill of countless generations of heroes. The creature noticed him and tried to drive him insane with visions of cosmic horror and ultimate meaninglessness. Marcus looked at the visions, shrugged, and cut them in half with his sword. "Yeah, existential dread," Marcus said, as he sliced through the creature's tentacles. "We invented that. You're going to have to try harder." The battle around Earth lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, the void spawn fleet was gone. Not destroyed, but driven back to the dark spaces between galaxies where they belonged. The few survivors fled in terror, carrying with them the knowledge that humanity had returned. Marcus stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the aftermath. Space around Earth was filled with the wreckage of void spawn creatures, but not a single human ship had been lost. It was not even close to a fair fight. "Status report," he called out. "All void spawn forces have retreated," Captain Kim replied. "Long-range sensors show them fleeing toward the galactic rim. They're not stopping." Martha's voice came over the communicator. "Well, that was fun," she said cheerfully. "Nothing like a good fight to get the blood pumping. Now, who wants some lemonade?" Marcus laughed. "Martha, you just helped save the galaxy. Don't you think this calls for something stronger than lemonade?" "Oh, I suppose I could break out the good iced tea." 3 months later, Marcus was back to running cargo between the stars. But things were different now. Humanity had taken their place as the galaxy's protectors again. But they had learned from their ancestors' mistakes. Instead of ruling over other species, they simply watched and waited. The galaxy was a safer place now that everyone knew humanity was awake again. Pirates had mysteriously stopped attacking human ships after word got out that the old lady in the floral dress could crack planets in half. Corrupt officials found themselves facing concerned citizens who carried briefcases full of reality-bending weapons. Marcus kept his sword, though he now knew its true history. He had returned to his simple life of fixing broken ships and hauling cargo. But he was ready if the galaxy needed him again. He was sitting in a cantina on a space station when a young alien approached him. The creature looked nervous and kept glancing at the sword on Marcus's belt. "Excuse me," the alien said in broken standard. "Are you really one of the sky gods?" Marcus took a sip of his beer and smiled. "Nah, kid. I'm just a guy who got lucky at a yard sale." The alien looked confused, but Marcus did not elaborate. Outside the cantina's windows, human ships passed by on their regular patrol routes. They looked like ordinary cargo vessels, but Marcus knew better. Each one was probably carrying enough firepower to level a moon. Operated by people who thought they were just truckers and delivery workers. The galaxy was protected by beings who bought universe-ending weapons for pocket change and thought nothing of it. Because to humans, even godlike power was just another Tuesday. And somewhere in Ohio, Martha Henderson was probably having a garage sale, selling off more old junk to unsuspecting customers who had no idea they were buying the tools that had saved the galaxy. Marcus finished his beer and headed back to his ship. After all, he had cargo to deliver, and the stars were waiting.